herein that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his plenary expansion of Supersoul, is present in all living entities. The living entities have 8,400,000 different kinds of bodies. And the Supreme Personality of Godhead is living in every body, both as the individual soul and as the Supersoul. Since the individual soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, in that sense, the Lord is living in every body. And as the Supersoul, the Lord is also present as a witness. In both cases, the presence of God in every living entity is essential. Therefore, persons who profess to belong to some religious sect, but who do not feel the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living entity and everywhere else, are in the mode of ignorance. If, without the preliminary knowledge of the Lord's omnipresence, one simply attaches himself to the rituals in a temple, church, or mosque, it is as if he were offering butter into the ashes rather than into the fire. One offers sacrifice by pouring clarified butter into the fire and chanting Vedic mantras. But even if there are Vedic mantras and all conditions are favorable, if the clarified butter is poured on ashes, then such a sacrifice will be useless. In other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. The devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant he may be, even an ant, God is present, and therefore every living entity should be kindly treated and should not be subjected to any violence. In modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Well, that eliminates all these slaughterhouses in the material world. And there's plenty of slaughterhouses, unfortunately. The British introduced slaughterhouses to India in the 1820s. They built the first slaughterhouse to kill cows. So, it's a very nice statement. It says, in other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. The devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant he may be, even an ant, God is present. And therefore, every living entity should be kindly treated and should not be subjected to any violence. In modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Well, there's still a lot of people in the mode of ignorance. especially when they have barbecues. They think it's a wonderful thing to have a barbecue in summer. And they barbecue some poor animal and eat it. And they think that this is really spiritual advancement. So it means that they're in complete ignorance. So a very nice statement here is, if without this preliminary knowledge of the Lord's omnipresence, meaning Krishna is present everywhere, one simply attaches himself to the rituals in a temple, church, or mosque, it is as if he were offering butter into ashes rather than into the fire. One offers sacrifices by pouring clarified butter into a fire and chanting Vedic mantras. But even if there are Vedic mantras and all conditions are favorable, if the clarified butter is poured on ashes, then such a sacrifice will be useless. In other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. The devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant, he may be even in an ant, God is present, and therefore every living entity should be kindly treated and should not be subjected to any violence. In modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Well, there's plenty of slaughterhouses in the United States, unfortunately, and all over the world. So this is in the mode of ignorance. And it doesn't matter what religion you're in. It could be Christianity, it could be Islam, it could be Judaism. They are unnecessarily killing living entities. And it's a sinful thing to do. So how can you say that they are civilized? They are not civilized. And that's why it says here, in modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. Yeah. Like you can take an animal to a rabbi, and a rabbi will say some prayers and kill the animal. So they have, individual priests or rabbis that are killing the animals, and then they also have the slaughterhouses. Either way, it is an abomination and not something that a civilized person should do. So the main point here is the devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant he may be, even in an ant, God is present, and therefore every living entity should be kindly treated and should not be subjected to any violence. In modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any society, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood to be in the mode of ignorance. Well, there's a lot of people in the mode of ignorance in the United States and all over the world, especially in the summertime. Americans like to have they'll get a barbecue, and they'll barbecue a poor animal and eat it. And they think that's really something good, but it's actually horrible and abominable and should never be done. So you don't only have you don't only have slaughterhouses, you have people, having a barbecue and slaughtering animals also in their backyard. However, without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. That should be clearly, really understood by everyone.
Because even if it is a spiritual.
What?
Here it says that if people do not come to the realization that presence of God in every living entity, even if that is spiritual movement or progress, it is to be understood as mode of ignorance.
Yes.
So does this mean like this actually means like all the other the so-called religions that
they're in the mode of ignorance?
Ignorance.
They are in the mode of ignorance. Yeah. I remember going to my church's picnic, and they were, having a barbecue, and the priest was there also. And he was also eating meat. So, unfortunately, today, in most religions, not all religions, there are some religions where they do not slaughter animals, where they actually protect the animals. It's not everybody is doing that, but everybody's not slaughtering animals. Well, actually, let's put it like this. Most people will have somebody else slaughter the animal and then eat it. So that's when you go to a butcher shop. A butcher shop has already slaughtered the animal, and now it just cuts up the animal into different pieces. So in every, let's say, supermarket, you have a butcher shop, and the animals have already been slaughtered, and they send it to the butcher shop that cuts the animals up into different parts and sells it. So theoretically, we should not go to any, let's say, supermarket in which they have, a meat section, because they're engaging in sinful activities. Even in, let's say there are stores where they say that they have kosher meat. Well, the animal is still being slaughtered. Doesn't matter, they're saying different mantras or whatever, but they're slaughtering the animal, they're cutting it up into pieces and selling it. So kosher meat is also sinful. Of course, the rabbis would say, no, 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 we said the prayers, this thing, that thing, but they're still slaughtering animals. Okay, so therefore it says here, therefore persons who profess to belong to some religious sect, but who do not feel the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every living entity and everywhere else, are in the mode of ignorance. If, without this preliminary knowledge of the Lord's omnipresence, one simply attaches himself to the rituals in a temple, church, or mosque, it is as if he were offering butter into ashes rather than into the fire. One offers sacrifices by pouring clarified butter into a fire and chanting Vedic mantras. But even if there are Vedic mantras and all conditions are favorable, if the clarified butter is poured on ashes, then such a sacrifice will be useless. In other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. The devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant it may be, even an ant, God is present. And therefore, every living entity should be kindly treated and should not be subjected to any violence. In modern civilized societies, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principles. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Well, I mean, after hearing that, if you go, let's say, into a supermarket in the United States, well, in almost every supermarket, or actually in every supermarket, there is a meat. Uh, there is a meat. They're selling meat, and they have butchers. So, is that something we should do? Should we go into a supermarket where they have a meat section and they're cutting up meat and selling it? That's a question. It's a good question to ask. That means that's a sinful place. And should we go and buy things from that place? Almost everywhere you go to, they have a meat department in every supermarket. You go to you go to these different supermarkets, even the ones that say that they are, let's say, organic, but they sell what's called organic meats. So they're still slaughtering the animals. And they say, well, no, this is special. It's organic meat. So I don't know if we should go into stores like that. But it might say, well, if we don't go into their stores, well, how can we shop then? How can we get things that we need? Right. That's why we should have our own farms. With no slaughter of the animals, and grow our own vegetables and so forth. Because every one of those stores where we go to buy things, even if they're organic, they're places where animals have been slaughtered and they're selling meat. So we shouldn't even go to any store like that. So here it says, in modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Now, if you think about it, I mean, after reading this, you think about it carefully. Should we go into Whole Foods and buy something? Well, they have a meat department, even in Whole Foods. They say no, everything here is organic. But they're selling so-called organic meat. They have a whole big section where they're cutting up meat and selling it. In the same place where we're buying, vegetables and so forth. We take it for granted. We walk into those stores and we take it for granted. And of course, we say, well, we don't buy any meat and we don't eat meat. We just buy the vegetables. But theoretically, the vegetables are also contaminated by being in a place where there are animals that have been slaughtered. That's why we have to have our own farms and not even go into these stores and buy things. Because everything is contaminated. They have every one of these stores has a big meat department. Is there any supermarket that we know where they do not sell meat? No. No. Like for example, we sell what's called Ahimsa milk. Well, it's Ahimsa in the sense that we do not have any slaughtering of animals. So, but see, people would. If we say don't go into a store or a supermarket that has meat. Well, some people would object. They say, well, then how are we going to buy anything to eat? Well, you have to have, an organized system where there's no meat involved. But if you just go into Whole Foods and buy your groceries there, they have a big meat system set apart in that store. So that means the whole place is contaminated. In modern civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. So basically, if we go into a supermarket that has a big meat section, that means that everything in that place is contaminated. Yeah. We have to have our own shops, not buy anything in these supermarkets, because the supermarket is contaminated. They have a big meat section. And every store you go to now has a big meat section. Even so-called, the organic supermarkets, they sell what's called organic meat. So, yeah. So where should we, that's why we have to have our own system of growing food and avoiding buying anything in supermarkets. Got to think about this. But we have to think about this. My bet is that if we open a supermarket without a meat shop or meat cart in it, that would be a novelty. Because nowadays, even you go to Whole Foods, they have a big meat market. So if we did have a shop like that, then people would come who do not want to have a shop in a place where they're selling meat, even though they have a section that's organic vegetables. That those vegetables are contaminated by the fact that that store is also selling meat. We should think about this carefully. Okay. The devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant he may be, even an ant, God is present, and therefore every living entity should be kindly treated and should not be subjected to any violence. In modern civilized societies, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. So whole foods should be considered as being in the mode of ignorance because they have a meat section. And there's no such thing as, organic meat. They advertise it, organic meat. The whole thing is a sham. It's sad. But see, now, if we eliminated going to supermarkets or even Whole Foods, would we be able to live? Yeah, we should have our own supermarket, our own market where devotees can come, and there's no meat there, no liquor and things like that. I mean, you go to Whole Foods, they have liquor, they have meat. So we shouldn't even go to those places, according to what's being said here. That's why it says, in other words, a devotee should not ignore any living entity. The devotee must know that in every living entity, however insignificant he may be, even an ant, God is present. And therefore, every living entity should be kindly treated and should not be subjected to any violence. In modern civilized societies, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Let me read that again. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Well, therefore, that would mean that kosher meat is also a mode of ignorance. The Jews, they think, well, they're eating kosher milk that's been blessed by a rabbi, and therefore you can eat it. But actually, no. It's actually in the mode of ignorance, even though the rabbi consecrates it or blesses it. And the Jews, they have slaughterhouses. And then and they sell, kosher meat. That means they're killing the animals. And they're selling it, and the people are buying it and eating it. So it doesn't matter if it's kosher or not kosher. it's still slaughtering animals and eating them. But without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human society, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. Now, if we go into a supermarket and they have a meat section, that means that whole place is contaminated. And we shouldn't buy anything in that place. Then the question comes, well, how can you buy things? Every supermarket you go to, there's a big meat section. We have to have our own farms, and we should have our own, well, for example, milk. We have our own milk, and it's guaranteed ahimsa milk. We should have all ahimsa products and not go to any other store. But the no slaughter store, that should be our new motto. No slaughter food. Okay. Well, in the summertime, we do have our own vegetables. People come and they buy it, and the devotees come and buy the vegetables. But we should have a whole system where there's no need to go to a supermarket. We have our own store where there's no meat, no fish, no eggs, etc. Because if you go to a store that's selling meat, it's contaminated. Even though you go to the section where there's only vegetables, but because they have meat in that store, it means it's contaminated. You got to think about this carefully. In modern civilized societies, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. I was always puzzled by this. You go to Whole Foods, and they're selling all organic foods, and they have a butcher part of the store where they have so-called organic meat. And I was always puzzled by it, but and right now I'm thinking more carefully. We should never even go into a store like that. Everything is contaminated because of their meat section. That just means that we have to become much more careful about our having a completely Krishna conscious stores, so that our devotees don't have to go into these supermarkets where they have meat and buy things. Okay. Well, then also, how about when our devotees go to buy things for the temple? Well, they go, okay, where do our devotees buy things for the temple?
They buy from Costco. Costco sells meat.
Yeah. Yeah, they sell a lot of meat. We got to think about this. If we could have our own, markets where people come and there's no meat at all, no nothing, no liquor. I mean, Costco also has liquor, right?
Very big section.
Yeah, wine.
Wine.
A huge section of wine, yeah, and a huge section of meat also.
Yes.
That's terrible. You got to think about this very carefully. Okay. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Text number 23. One who offers me, meaning Krishna, respect, but is envious of the bodies of others and is therefore a separatist, never attains peace of mind because of his inimical behavior towards other living entities. Wow. Very nice verse. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, two phrases, Bhuteshu Vada Vairasya, inimical towards others, and Devi Sata Parakaye, envious of another body, are significant. One who is envious of or inimical towards others never experiences any happiness. A devotee's vision, therefore, must be perfect. He should ignore bodily distinctions and should see only the presence of the part and parcel of the Supreme Lord and the Lord himself in his plenary expansion as super soul. That is the vision of a pure devotee. The bodily expression of a particular type of living entity is always ignored by the devotee. It is expressed herein that the Lord is always eager to deliver the conditioned souls who have been engaged within material bodies. Devotees are expected to carry the message or desire of the Lord to such conditioned souls and enlighten them with Krishna consciousness. Thus, they may be elevated to transcendental spiritual life, and the mission of their lives will be successful. Of course, this is not possible for living entities who are lower than human beings, but in human society it is feasible that all living entities can be enlightened with Krishna consciousness. Even living entities who are lower than human can be raised to Krishna consciousness by other methods. For example, Shivananda Sena, a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, delivered a dog by feeding him prasada. Distribution of prasada or remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, even to the ignorant masses of people and to animals, gives such living entities the chance for elevation to Krishna consciousness. Factually, it happened that the same dog, when met by Lord Chaitanya at Puri, was liberated from the material condition. In other words, it went back to Godhead because it was being fed prasadam. And Lord Chaitanya threw a banana for that dog that came with Shivananda's, and the dog ate it, and it went back to Godhead. It disappeared. It didn't run away. It went back to Godhead. And that was the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. That's where it says, for example, Shivananda Sena, a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, delivered a dog by feeding him prasada. Distribution of prasada or remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, even to the ignorant masses of people and to animals, gives such living entities the chance for elevation to Krishna consciousness. Factually, it happened that the same dog, when met by Lord Chaitanya at Puri, was liberated from the material condition. Okay, so if you have a dog and you only give it prasad, that dog's going to be liberated. Right? Yeah. So it's not only people that can be liberated by prasad, it's also the dogs and cats and other animals. Even the ants in the house they ate a little piece of sugar or something that was offered to the Lord, they'll be purified. Okay. Any questions? These are nice verses.
So if we decide to only feed prasadam, is it okay to keep the dogs still at home?
What? If we only what?
There are some people that are dealing with, let's say, having dogs at home.
Yeah.
If they only decide to feed prasadam to the dog, is it okay to keep the dog at home?
Well, you see, dogs should never be in the house. If you want to keep a dog, you build a dog house in your yard. And the dog lives in the dog house, never comes into the house. If it comes in the house, the whole house is contaminated. But people love the dog, they're having a dinner, the dog is there and the dog comes up to the people in the house eating and they give the dog some food, and they peck the dog also with their hand, right? And then they're still eating like that. It's completely nonsense. It's completely, if you keep the dog outside, don't let it come into the house. Of course, the dog will want to get into the house. He does not want to be alone, So best thing is not to have a dog. Because you have the dog, you have to take it out to pass stool. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to pick up the stool. Legally nowadays, you have to pick up the stool. And then throw it away somewhere. They have these places where you can get some plastic bag and pick up the stool. Let's say that puts you in a bad situation. You have a dog, you're going to always be unclean. You're never going to be clean. And especially if you let the dog into the house, everything's going to be contaminated. I know devotees that have dogs. They keep them in the house. So it's unimaginable. I mean, Prabhupada never had a dog. He didn't hate dogs, but he never kept a dog in the house. There are a bunch of devotees that have dogs. And they go and, walk with the dog outside for exercise. They even let the dog in the house. All right. So, text number 24.
And we still haven't read the last paragraph.
Okay. It is especially mentioned here that a devotee must be free from all violence. Jiva Himsa. Lord Chaitanya has recommended that a devotee not commit violence to any living entity. Sometimes the question is raised that since vegetables also have life, and devotees take vegetable foodstuffs, isn't that violence? Firstly, however, taking some leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree or plant does not kill the plant. Besides that, Jiva Himsa means that since every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body, according to his past karma, although every living entity is eternal, he should not be disturbed in his gradual evolution. A devotee has to execute the principles of devotional service exactly as they are, and he must know that however insignificant a living entity may be, the Lord is present within him. A devotee must realize this universal presence of the Lord. So what is he saying here exactly? He says, Jiva Himsa means that since every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body according to his past karma, although every living entity is eternal, he should not be disturbed in his gradual evolution. A devotee has to execute the principles of devotional service exactly as they are, and he must know that however insignificant a living entity may be, the Lord is present within him. A devotee must realize this universal presence of the Lord. Okay, let's say we realize the universal presence of the Lord. Does that give us a right to kill some animal and eat it? Does that give us the right to eat a vegetable, which is a living being also? That's why it says here, sometimes the question is raised that since vegetables also have life and devotees take vegetable foodstuffs, isn't that violence? Then Prabhupada says, firstly, however, taking some leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree or plant does not kill the plant. Besides that, Jiva Himsa means that since every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body according to his past karma, although every living entity is eternal, he should not be disturbed in his gradual evolution. A devotee has to execute the principle of devotional service exactly, and the principles of devotional service exactly as they are, and he must know that however insignificant a living entity may be, the Lord is present within him. A devotee must realize this universal presence of the Lord. Okay, then how can you eat something then? Right? Even a vegetable. Vegetables also have life. Sometimes the question is raised that since vegetables also have life and devotees take vegetable foodstuffs, isn't that violence? Firstly, however, taking some leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree or plant does not kill the plant. Okay, so Prabhupada is, by saying that, he's implying we should only eat things like fruit from a tree or plants, because you're not killing the plant. You're just taking the fruit of the plant. Right? So there are fruitarians. They refuse to eat anything other than just fruit. Or vegetables. So they're not killing any type of, well, they're all living entities.
No, but I think the point Prabhupada is making here, Maharaj, I think is, let's say if it's an animal, you kill, I mean, in order to eat it, you have to kill the whole animal. Whereas if you take fruits from the plant, the fruit itself is a byproduct. I mean, it has life, but it is, but you're not killing the tree, right? Similarly, you take, vegetables or, those kinds of things. But then the question might be like, if your roots, it's a byproduct of the, I mean, the original tree is not getting killed, or the original plant is not getting killed.
Well,
like, so in case of an animal, in order to eat the animal,
you understand the tree. You pick the fruit of the tree. You're not killing the tree.
Correct.
You're killing the fruit, but you're not killing the tree. All right. That's that's called, in other words, you have people who are fruitarians. They will not eat anything except fruits that are grown on trees. But if you eat, like, say,
like let's say tomatoes, squashes, all these things are also, you're not killing the original plant. But when it comes to potatoes,
yeah, what about them?
because they're at the root, you have to take the whole thing out, right?
Yeah.
Or is it like when the plant naturally dies, you take the plant?
No one would eat that because it would be rotten by that time.
Hmm.
You eat a potato that is rotting. No one will eat it. They want to have, a nice potato or a nice tomato.
No, do potatoes plants, do they, I mean, end their life at the end of the season automatically or no? I don't know.
What?
At the end of the season,
Yeah.
does the plant die automatically?
Well,
That's good.
you can keep plants for a long time in the proper way. Like, you have refrigerators, and you can keep them for a certain amount of time before they begin to deteriorate.
So it says, ChatGPT says that most potato plants die back after their growing season is complete. So because they're annuals, potatoes are typically grown as annuals, meaning they complete their life cycle within one growing season. After the plant flowers and the leaves and stems turn yellow and die, the plant is signaling that the potatoes are mature and ready for harvest. So it's design of the Lord. The annuals are again wherein like the Lord basically is saying, okay, they're
Also, you don't eat the all the potatoes and things like that. You keep some to grow another
to grow.
generation of potatoes.
Hare Krishna.
Yes,
Can I make a comment about the fruits?
yes.
Could it be that when we pick the fruits from the trees, or like the bananas, like they continue to ripen, so maybe they're still alive when we eat them? Like when we get bananas, they're green when we pick them, and then we take them home, they continue to ripen, they turn yellow, so maybe they're still alive. And same with the apples, they continue to ripen, so they're alive when we eat them.
Yes. Yeah, because if you plant the whole banana or you plant the whole apple, it will eventually grow.
So maybe we don't kill the fruits when we pick them.
Oh, let's put it like this. If you offer the food, the vegetarian food to Krishna, then and Krishna accepts the offering, then you're allowed to eat it. But you're not allowed to have meat, fish, or eggs, or any type of living entity. But vegetables are living entities also, but you're permitted to have certain types of vegetables. Like, for example, why don't we eat there's certain vegetables that we don't eat. I'm trying to think of one. Well, we don't like marijuana. Marijuana is a plant, right? But we don't. They don't eat it or have or smoke it because it's an intoxicant. So there are vegetables that we don't eat because they're not in the mode of goodness. So what's a vegetable that's in the mode of goodness? Well, an apple, because you're not killing the tree. You're just eating the fruit of the tree. So that would be in the mode of goodness. And the apple has seeds in it. And if you keep the seeds and plant them, then you get more apples, more apple trees, and then more apples. So there is such a thing as, having a himsa, a non-violent, let's say, food. If you have an apple and you keep the seeds and then plant them, then you're proliferating the life of the apple. All you ate, you're not eating the seeds. All you ate was the fruit of the apple, but not the seeds. And then you plant the seeds. Now you have a new generation of apples and trees. So that would be considered nonviolence. All you're doing is eating the fruit of the apple, not the tree itself. And the apples that you are eating, you can plant the seeds and produce more trees and more apples. But that would be considered, nonviolent type of eating. Even a tomato, let's say you get a tomato and you plant the whole tomato on the ground, it will produce a tomato plant. Anyway, the main thing is we should offer the food to Krishna before we eat.
Yeah.
Then it becomes free from all types of karma. And then if we eat that, offered vegetables, there's no karma involved. If we eat without offering to Krishna, there is karma involved. If we eat without, but of course, you can't eat meat. It's not that, you buy a piece of meat and you offer it to Krishna, because Krishna would not accept it. He only accepts vegetables and milk and things, in the mode of goodness like that. There are vegetables in the mode of ignorance. We don't eat those vegetables. Like what would be a vegetable in the mode of ignorance? They usually grow in the dark. So mushrooms. We don't usually eat mushrooms because they grow in darkness. But so basically, I always tell people we should never eat anything that has eyes and a family. That eliminates the fish. That eliminates a lot of things, but it doesn't eliminate an apple. An apple doesn't have eyes and a family, and it has seeds. So you can eat the apple and then and plant the seeds that'll grow more apples eventually, and more tree, and then more apples. So you're not actually killing. So here it says, a devotee has to execute the principles of devotional service exactly as they are. And he must know that however insignificant a living entity may be, the Lord is present within him. A devotee must realize this universal presence of the Lord. That's a very big statement. very important statement. So Krishna is present in everything. Therefore, before we eat anything, we should first offer it to Krishna, and we can only offer Krishna those things that he will accept, such as fruits and vegetables and milk. Okay, so are there any questions? Here it says, sometimes the question is raised that since vegetables also have life and devotees take vegetable foodstuffs, isn't that violence? Prabhupada writes, firstly, however, taking some leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree or plant does not kill the plant. Uh-oh, watch out now. That's that's a big statement, because if you eat the leaves of a tree, you're not killing the tree. And if you eat the fruit of a tree, you're not killing the fruit. You're not killing the tree. So if you want to be very, very, let's say, careful about not committing any sinful activity, it says, that's why Prabhupada says, Lord Chaitanya recommended that a devotee not commit violence to any living entity. Sometimes the question is raised that since vegetables also have life and devotees take vegetable foodstuffs, isn't that violence? Firstly, however, taking some leaves and twigs or fruit from a tree or plant does not kill the plant. Uh-oh. That is it means that you have to be very careful what you eat. And then it says, besides that, jiva himsa means that since every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body according to his past karma, although every living entity is eternal, he should not be disturbed in his gradual evolution. A devotee has to execute the principles of devotional service exactly as they are, and he must know that however insignificant a living entity may be, the Lord is present within him. A devotee must realize this universal presence of the Lord. Well, what he's saying here is that every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body according to his past karma. So if you take, let's say, if you kill a cat, that would be sinful because you're not letting the cat have its normal life, and therefore it's going to have to take birth again as a cat. And then if it lives through its whole cycle, then it will go to its next level of consciousness. But if you kill the cat or you kill the cow and eat it, you're holding that animal back, or that soul back, from advancing in the normal way to the human form of life. So, and that's why he's saying here, Jiva, and besides that, Jiva Himsa means that since every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body according to his past karma, although every living entity is eternal, he should not be disturbed in his gradual evolution. Well, yeah, we might start as a we might go through, we're going through many different bodies. There are 8,400,000 different types of species. And to get to the human species, we have to go through at least 8,400,000 different species. So if somebody kills the species that we're in, that means they are holding back the gradual evolution of the living entity from one species to another. All the species exist. There's no species of evolution like Darwin explains. But if you, let's say, kill a cow, then you're stopping the cow from going to its next, let's say, evolution of becoming a human being. And therefore, you're stopping it from its normal progression. So therefore it says, Prabhupada says here, sometimes the question is raised that since vegetables also have life and devotees take vegetable foodstuffs, isn't that violence? Firstly, however, taking some leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree or plant does not kill the plant. Besides that, Jiva Himsa means that since every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body according to his past karma, although every living entity is eternal, he should not be disturbed in his gradual evolution from one species to another. A devotee has to execute the principles of devotional service exactly as they are, and he must know that however insignificant a living entity may be, the Lord is present within him. A devotee must realize his universal presence of the Lord, must realize this universal presence of the Lord. Well, that means we have to be very careful in what we eat. So, Prabhupada is implying here, if you eat some leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree or plant, that does not kill the plant. Okay, so to have a non-violent, what you would call a non-violent diet, you should only eat leaves, twigs, or fruits from a tree or plant, because that does not kill the plant. Besides that, Jiva Himsa means that since every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body according to his past karma, although every living entity is eternal, he should not be disturbed in his gradual evolution. Well, we should not eat a plant that let's see, if you have a tree, when you pick the fruit of the tree, you're not killing the tree. Okay, so that is a Himsa diet. You're not actually killing the tree, you're just taking the fruit. So so if you're a fruitarian, you are avoiding gross killing. But if you're eating meat, well, that's gross because you have to kill the animal. So if you just have a fruit diet, or you eat only potatoes, Actually, you can cut one part of a potato and plant it and eat the other part. So you haven't actually killed it. And the part that you put into the ground will grow again, grow another potato. So there are things that can proliferate life and give you the opportunity to eat and still not cause, uh, a death of the plant. So if you eat only part of a potato and you plant the other part of the potato, it will produce another potato. Same with the tomatoes. Tomatoes have a lot of seeds in them. So if you eat the tomato, but keep the seeds and plant it, then it's going to grow more tomatoes. So there is something called nonviolent eating. We should only eat things that are like leaves. So by eating a leaf, you're not actually killing the plant. And Prabhupada mentions that. He says, sometimes the question is raised that since vegetables also have life, and devotees take vegetable foodstuffs, isn't that violence? Firstly, however, taking some leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree or plant does not kill the plant. Besides that, Jivahimsa means that since every living entity has to pass through a particular type of body according to his past karma, although every living entity is eternal, he should not be disturbed in his gradual evolution. A devotee has to execute the principle of devotional service, the principles of devotional service exactly as they are, and he must know that however insignificant a living entity may be, the Lord is present within him. A devotee must realize this universal presence of the Lord. Well, that means you're going to have to be very careful about what you eat. So if you eat leaves and twigs or fruit from a tree, that doesn't kill the plant. Okay. So okay, so what do we eat actually when you buy? Well, we have tomatoes, we have potatoes, and
different vegetables,
milk.
some fruits, milk, and then we have rice,
Nuts.
grains, nuts.
Yeah.
But those are all, again, same thing. We're not necessarily killing the original plant. When the potatoes, anything that's the roots, technically they're all annuals. Means, Lord's creation is that in order to feed the humans, I think, is created them as an annuals. And then in a way that, again, you plant them, the byproduct, like potatoes.
If you plant the eye of the potato,
it will, again,
grow
continue another potato. The same thing with seeds.
So theoretically, we shouldn't eat the whole potato.
Well, I mean, that's the same as the seeds, right, Maharaj? Like rice also is nothing but they are seeds.
Yeah.
Our grains are also
Whole grains.
whole grains, right? So, but I think
a tomato, let's say you buy some tomatoes to eat, and one of those tomatoes you plant. Even if you just throw it in the ground, right?
Yeah.
It'll grow other tomatoes. Well, okay. The main thing is that whatever we're going to eat, we should first offer it to Krishna. So someone might say, oh, okay, then I'll offer meat to Krishna. No, you can't, because Krishna doesn't accept meat as an offering. So therefore, we can only eat vegetables, but we can't really eat anything that's vegetable. Like marijuana is a vegetable. You know, it's something that grows as leaves and things like that. So there is the necessity to have knowledge of what we can eat and what we can't eat. Like mushrooms. Mushrooms are considered, most mushrooms are considered to be in a mode of ignorance because they grow in darkness. So we should avoid eating mushrooms, especially ones that grow in darkness. There are some mushrooms that do not grow in darkness, but still, there's something wrong with eating a mushroom. There are some mushrooms that grow.
They're probably more in the modes of ignorance, and
Yeah,
and there are also some poisonous ones.
yes, yeah, definitely. So the best thing is milk. There's no problem with milk. Milk from animals that are protected. If you take milk from animals that are going to be slaughtered, that would be a mistake. That's why you go to the supermarket and you buy a gallon of milk. Those animals are being exploited and they're going to be killed. They don't usually let them live more than 8 to 10 years, because after that they don't give as much milk. Therefore, they kill the animal, the cow, and sell the meat. So that's all the meat that you see in these supermarkets. They are cows or fish or whatever that have been killed, and their natural cycle of life has been stopped. So you're really committing a sinful act by not letting the cow or the fish have its full cycle and going to the next level of evolution. So therefore, being a vegetarian, all right, you're avoiding a lot of killing. But even as a vegetarian, you have to be careful what you eat.
Mm-hmm.
So if you eat only leaves, like spinach, you can cut the leaves of the spinach plant but you don't actually pull it out of the.
Yeah, the same thing with the cilantro. We cut it and then it grows back again.
Yes.
Only we're cutting the leaves.
Yes.
Then,
it's a whole thing. It's a whole science.
Yeah.
Knowing how to eat and what to eat. So you don't commit any unnecessary sinful activities. You see how much ignorance there is in this world, People eat sardines, they go and they buy a tin of sardines, They just ignore the fact that, those are living entities that have been killed, that are actually dead, and they're eating it. It's horrible. I never ate a sardine in my life.
Is that sardine with a fish or what?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
A little fish.
Yeah.
They sell them in tins, tin boxes. I don't know how people can eat those things. It's horrible. Okay, so
time check. So
we are near the end of our discussion. Are there any questions? Okay, so our takeaway is it says, sometimes the question is raised that since vegetables also have life and devotees take vegetable foodstuffs, isn't that violence? Then Prabhupada said, firstly, however, taking some leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree or plant does not kill the plant. Besides that, so Prabhupada is saying we should only eat leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree. Okay, so you basically you become a fruitarian.
So there are some questions here, Maharaj. Just I'll ask. So what about sprouts? Because sprouts are about new life. Are we killing the life if we eat sprouts? That's a good question.
Yeah, well, sprout is a seed that
It's just
starts
forming
growing into
a plant.
Yeah, plant. So if you let it grow into a plant and you only eat the leaves of the plant, you're not actually killing it.
Mm-hmm. So are we, the sprouts?
And you let it grow, you let it, part of it grow into, and so that it produces more seeds. And then those seeds become plants. So that's sort of like a generational farming. You're not harvesting everything. You're keeping some back, some plants back, so that they give seeds, and so that those seeds can fructify and give more plants. But the ideal thing is to eat only leaves, twigs, or fruit from a tree. From a tree or a plant that does not kill the plant. So what do we eat? What do we eat? We eat potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And see, you take the eye of the potato and plant it, it gives you more potatoes. And not just one potato, it gives you a whole bunch of them. This is all pointing to the need to have a farm and growing your own food and doing it in a sustainable way by keeping the seeds of everything you grow and planting those seeds, generation after generation, where you're proliferating the life of these or the species of what you're eating.
Mm-hmm. Shall we wrap up? It's about 8 o'clock.
Yeah. There's more to be discussed about.
Yeah, we can probably continue.
Okay, thank you very much, all for
Srila Prabhupada ki.
And be very careful what you eat.
Haribol.